Philosophy according to the Book of Change. Fu Xi is the first author of the Book of Change. He lived in about the 43rd or 44th century BC. Another author is King Wen. He lived in between 1152 and 1056 BC. Another author is the Duke of Chao, King Wen's son. The last author is Confucius, who lived in 551 and died in 479 BC. By its authors, the Book of Change is one of the oldest books of mankind. What does the Book of Change talk about? According to a traditional interpretation, the Book of Change is a book of divination. We easily find this tendency in books about the Book of Change, including famous ones. There is also a tendency to interpret it as a book of wisdom, philosophy. There is even a tendency to combine it as a book of divination and a book of wisdom. We can find the author's idea or the content of the Book of Change according to its author's social life. Fu Xi and King Wen were kings. The Duke of Chao was a governor and Confucius was a teacher. The authors discuss the manner of man regarding individual life as well as social life, the cultivation of the person, and pacification of the world. Therefore, the Book of Change talks about the way as human way. The Book of Change talks about the way understood as the way of living or the dwelling of man. However, is such a statement not contrary to the title and the content of the book? The title is Book of Change. Change is a change or the movement of a thing and all things. Why is the way named a change? Are we not looking for the eternal and unchangeable way? Indeed, the change can be understood as the change of a thing. We see the change of a thing every day. A flower blossoms in the morning and withers in the evening, but the way of man changes too. According to situations, we change our manner of living. We see the change of our manner of living every moment. So the word change does not help us in the decision whether the Book of Change talks about the change of a thing or the change of human manner of living. How about the content of the book? The Book of Change begins with hexagram heaven and hexagram earth. The hexagram heaven begins with judgment heaven, originating, prospering, beneficial, firming, and commentary on the judgment. 1. Great indeed is the heavens originating. All things owe to it their beginning. It permeates all things under the sky. 2. Clouds flow and rain comes. All things complete their forms. All things are in the framework of heaven and earth. They are born, grow up, and perish in the framework of heaven and earth. Heaven and earth participate in or create the birth, the growth, and the death of all things. Reading, originating, prospering, beneficial, firming, and clouds flow and rain comes. All things complete their forms. We seem not to be able not to think that the Book of Change talks about the change of all things, and heaven and earth are the authors of the change. Therefore, we could say the interpretation of the Book of Change as talking about the change of all things is natural and is naturally correct. The Book of Change also talks about the way of the superior man and the way of the inferior man. However, this is not the main topic, especially when heaven denotes yang, ether, and earth denotes yin, ether. with yang and yin as two ethers existing eminently in all things and conducting the movement of all things, including men, the tendency of the above-mentioned interpretation becomes more dominant. Eastern medicine also uses yang-yin for the treatment of human health. Is there still a reason to interpret the Book of Change as a book about human way? We have relied on the social life of the authors to interpret the Book of Change as a book about human way. Let us read the beginning of Confucius's Wen Yen commentary on the hexagram heaven. 1. Origination is the essential quality of goodness. Prosperity is the assemblage of beauty. Beneficial is the harmony of rightness. Formingness is the source of action. 2. Embodying humanity. The superior man is able to be the head of men. Presenting as assemblage of excellences, he is able to unite all that is proper, benefiting all things. He is able to bring them into harmony through rightness, firming. He is able to carry out all actions. 3. The superior man practices these four virtues. Therefore it is said, heaven is originating, prospering, beneficial, firming. Reading the above commentary of Confucius, one of the authors, we see an interpretation of the Book of Change completely as a book of human way. So the above-mentioned natural and naturally correct interpretation now seems to be not natural and naturally correct. Heaven originating. Confucius says that origination is the essential quality of goodness. So heaven is goodness. In the hexagram heaven, heaven does not denote the sky, but goodness. Why is heaven goodness? Goodness is goodness for human dwelling. Man seeks a peaceful dwelling. Heaven shows to man the way leading to a peaceful dwelling. The statement, clouds flow and rain comes, all things complete their forms, does not mean that clouds and rain make things grow. This is a fact that everybody knows. The authors of the Book of Change did not create a book to express such an ordinary, childish act. The statement wants to say that if men want to found a peaceful dwelling, they have to do the things that contribute to the founding of a peaceful dwelling, like clouds and rain contribute to the growth of things. Looking at heaven and at earth, we know things that contribute to or destroy a peaceful dwelling. The way as peaceful dwelling is heaven and earth, because heaven and earth show us what a peaceful dwelling. Earth with its fertility makes trees and vegetables grow. Earth is the place for human housing. Heaven with its rain and sunlight also makes trees and vegetables grow, brings coolness and warmness. Making trees and vegetables grow, being the place of housing, and bringing coolness and warmness contribute to the founding of the peaceful dwelling. On earth, there are people and animals who love one another, help one another. In heaven, there is God who grants graces. Loving, helping, and granting graces contribute to the founding of a peaceful dwelling. Man seeks a peaceful dwelling. From where does man get the idea of a peaceful dwelling? It is from heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are the origin of the idea of the way as peaceful dwelling. Heaven prospering. Confucius says that prosperity is the assemblage of beauty. Beauty is beauty for the peaceful dwelling. Relying on heaven as goodness, the peaceful dwelling is beautifully assembled and pacified. That is the meaning of prosperity. Heaven is beneficial. Confucius says that beneficialness is the harmony of rightness. Beneficialness is the rightness of actions. Looking at heaven, man knows right doings from the peaceful dwelling. That is why heaven is beneficial. Heaven firming. Confucius says that firmingness is source of action. Acting according to the direction of heaven, the peaceful dwelling will last long. Besides heaven and earth, the Book of Change also talks about God's spirits. God, or the ruler of heaven, is the image of goodness, the holy. God grants graces. Goodness and graces contribute to the peaceful dwelling. Spirits denote human souls after death. Spirits can be ghosts, however, they can be good ghosts. Spirits remind men of their death. Living under the shadow of death also contributes to the peaceful dwelling. The authors of the Book of Change have the attunement of heaven, earth, God's spirits as the dimension of the peaceful dwelling. Heaven plays the dominant role. Therefore, the superior man dwells according to heaven. Dwelling is not dwelling in an empty place. Dwelling is dwelling amid things and with other people. The superior man lets things appear in the manner by which they contribute to a peaceful dwelling. Building a bridge so that people can cross a river contributes to peaceful dwelling, and making a bomb to kill people destroys the peaceful dwelling. The way is understood as human manner of living. Everybody has his own way of living. There is not a common way of living for men. This is called the freedom of man. Freedom is freedom of the choice of the way of living. Because each person has his own way of living, there arises the question, what is the way of living that each person should follow? Especially because man is a social being, and the way of living of this person can influence the way of living of other persons, there arises the question, what is the way of living of a person that does not harm the way of living of other persons? In the human society appear persons who catch the view that the ordinary way of living of a person is not good for himself as well as for other persons. If it is not good, why does that person choose that way of living? Because he lives in ignorance. From here comes education. Confucius taught the way without tiresomeness. Jesus Christ taught the way until his crucifixion. An author of a book wants to express something. The authors of the Book of Change want to express the way. What is the way? The Book of Change talks about the superior man and the inferior man. The superior man is he who has attained the way. lives with the way, spreads the way, rules by the way if he is a ruler. The inferior man is he who has not attained the way, does not live with the way, does not spread the way, does not rule by the way if he is a ruler. What happens with living in harmony with the way, and what happens with living not in harmony with the way? We have hexagram 11, peace. Hexagram 16, gratification. Hexagram 52, stillness. Hexagram 58, joy. The way brings peace, gratification, stillness, and joy. The way brings a peaceful dwelling. On the contrary, the no way brings war, sorrow, recklessness, and sadness. The no way brings an unpeaceful dwelling. Seeking a peaceful dwelling is a wish which lies in a man's heart. Man is always anxious about the way as peaceful dwelling. The way always speaks to man or calls him. But every day, not everybody has a peaceful dwelling. There are many different situations of living. There are men full of the way. There are men without the way. There are men with somewhat way. There are good rulers. There are wicked rulers. There are sometimes good, sometimes wicked rulers. If the situation is without way or somewhat way, a return to the way is worthy. Hexagram 1. Heaven denotes a way. Why does heaven play such an important role? Heaven originating. Confucius says, origination is the essential quality of goodness. Heaven, or the ruler of heaven, is the image of goodness. There's no bad ruler of heaven. Goodness is also named justice. Relying on what do we know, goodness or justice? Relying on the peaceful dwelling. What leads to the peaceful dwelling is good or just. Building a house for the protection of rain and sunlight is good because it contributes to the peaceful dwelling. Making a bomb for killing is bad because it destroys the peaceful dwelling. Why is the ruler of heaven the image of goodness or justice? Because justice or goodness is abstract, and man needs a concrete image for goodness or justice. He chooses the ruler of heaven. As the pure ruler of heaven, we do not know whether he exists or not, but as the image of goodness, the ruler of heaven really exists. Hexagram 2, Earth, also denotes a way with the condition that Earth follows heaven. Why does Earth have to follow heaven? Because on Earth there are many bad or unjust things. If Earth wants to become good, it must follow heaven. Man cannot abandon Earth. He lives on Earth. Earth must follow heaven in order that it becomes good and brings a peaceful dwelling. The authors of the Book of Change see such a reality. That is what can be named suchness. Earth and heaven must be in harmony. That is the Buddha's middle way and Confucius's mean. In the Beatitudes, Jesus talks about the kingdom of heaven and inheriting the earth. Since when has man seen a kingdom of heaven on the earth, or at least the need or a wish of a kingdom of heaven on the earth? Earth has to cast away its evil or unjust things. Evil, or the unjust, is harmful for the peaceful dwelling. Hexagram 51. Thundering thunder does not talk about the event of thunder in the sky. It talks about the way that happens as a thunder to call man who is living far from the way to return to the way. Thunder thunders for 100 miles. It startles those in the distance and brings fear to those close by. Thunder brings fear of a dwelling far from the way, so people know how to change. Therefore is the statement. Thus, it is able to come forth to protect the ancestral temple and the nation. Therefore, it is the leader of the sacrifice. It seems that the authors of the Book of Change believe that if people know the way, they will follow it. Hexagram 50, the cauldron. The way happens as a cauldron. The cauldron is cooking and nourishing. The sage cooks to prepare offerings to the Lord of Heaven, and cooks much to nourish the sage and the worthy. God also needs the way. Without the way, God is God no longer. When he lost the way, an angel becomes Lucifer. The sages also need the way. Without the way, they are sages no longer. Hexagram 3. Difficult beginning. Man daily lives far from the way. The beginning of the journey to the way is already difficult. If the present world is evil and inhuman, the journey of mankind to the way meets with a big obstacle. Hexagram 4. Childhood. Regarding the way, childhood is not yet knowing of the way. A child is childish, naive, or dark. Regarding the way, the technological time is a childish time. Hexagram 24. Return. Talks about return to the way or return of the way. Thus, the return supposes the previous fallenness. People have been far from the way, or the way has been far from people. Hexagram marrying maiden talks about man's return to the way, how to return to the way. The Book of Change talks about the superior man and the inferior man. The superior man does things that construct the peaceful dwelling. These are good things. And the inferior man does things that destroy the peaceful dwelling. These are bad things. The good fortune, achievement, and the misfortune, failure, are the good fortune or the misfortune of the peaceful dwelling. In the perspective of the way or the peaceful dwelling, we are able to understand the words of the Book of Change. In The Complete I Ching, I explain all the words of the Book of Change as the words about the way or of the way. Of the way in the meaning of the speaking of the way. Therefore, philosophy, according to the Book of Change, is a study of the way as peaceful dwelling for an individual person as well as for a social person. The Book of Change is one of the oldest books of mankind. We return to the Book of Change to find the precious way that the ancient men saw, but the today men have lost. There are so many words and statements about so many situations of the good fortune and the misfortune of the way. It is certain that mankind will still exist on this planet for a long time. should the recuperation of that precious way not be a worthy task. The complete I Ching, Book of Change, by Tien Cong Tran, is available on Amazon.com.